The siren's embrace was a floating palace of polished marble and endless buffets, a world away from the small, salt-sprayed town where Eleanor Vance had spent her life. At 57, with calloused hands from a lifetime of gardening and a face lined by the sun, she was an anomaly among the younger, thrill-seeking passengers. Her retirement cruise was a gift from her children, a well-intentioned push to get her to see the world. But Eleanor had always found her world in the rhythm of the tides and the stories the wind told. And today, the wind was telling a very different story. From her modest cabin balcony, she watched the endless blue of the Atlantic. It was a beautiful day, almost unnervingly perfect. The sun beat down in a warm, sleepy haze, and the ocean surface was as smooth as glass. But Eleanor's eyes were trained not on the tranquil water, but on the horizon. A deep, bruised purple was bleeding into the otherwise pristine blue sky, a color she recognized from years of watching storms roll in off the North Carolina coast. She knew the feel of a calm before the fury, the way the air grows heavy and the birds fall silent. She saw a lone albatross flying low, a desperate speed in its wings, a creature trying to outrun something vast and terrible. This wasn't a normal squall. This was something different. Her first attempt at a warning was to a young deckhand, a nervous boy with a name tag that read Leo. He was dutifully wiping down the railings, and she approached him cautiously. "Excuse me, son," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Do you see that on the horizon? The sky's changing color. I think a big storm is coming in fast." Leo glanced over his shoulder, a polite, practiced smile on his face. "Yes, ma'am. We've got our own weather radar on the bridge. It's just a little front. Nothing to worry about." He went back to his work, his dismissal gentle but absolute. To him, Eleanor was just an overly anxious passenger, one of the thousands he'd encountered. But the feeling didn't leave her. It grew, a tightening knot in her stomach. By early afternoon, the sky had taken on a sickly yellow-green tint, and the air was thick with humidity, making it hard to breathe. The smooth water was now punctuated by a restless swell, a subtle, uneasy movement that rocked the immense ship. She tried again, this time with a senior officer near the ship's main pool. He was an older man, portly and confident, with a crisp white uniform. "Sir, I'm sorry to bother you, but that storm is a lot closer than you think," Eleanor said, pointing with a trembling hand toward the darkening horizon. He followed her gaze and chuckled. "My dear, this ship has the most advanced meteorological equipment in the world. We're a marvel of modern engineering. The captain has the situation completely under control. You go on and enjoy your vacation." He patted her on the shoulder and walked away, leaving Eleanor feeling foolish and helpless. Desperate, she found her way to the bridge. A small, nondescript door was her target, and she waited until it was momentarily propped open by a crew member rushing out. She slipped inside, the hum of sophisticated machinery filling the air. She was immediately met by a security officer who was about to escort her out when the ship's captain, James Harrison, a man with a tired face and a commanding presence, noticed the commotion. "What's the meaning of this?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. Eleanor, forgetting her fear, walked right up to him. "Captain, I'm so sorry, but you have to listen to me. I grew up on the coast. I know the ocean. I've watched it my whole life. The sky, the feel of the air, the way the waves are starting to act. Your instruments must be wrong. There's a hurricane coming, and it's coming fast. We need to change course, or we need to prepare for the worst." Captain Harrison looked at her, then at the multiple screens on his console. They all showed a clear path, with a minor storm system miles away. He had decades of experience, all the data in the world, and a multi-million-dollar ship to protect. What could this woman, this stranger, possibly know? "Ma'am," he said, his tone softening slightly, "I appreciate your concern, but my instruments tell me we're safe. We are on schedule. The best thing you can do is return to your cabin." He turned back to his screens, ending the conversation. Just as Eleanor was being led away, a red alert began to flash on one of the smaller screens on the console. Captain Harrison's eyes widened as the projected image of a massive, swirling hurricane, a perfect storm that had formed with shocking speed, appeared. It was directly in their path. The ship's main PA system crackled to life. "This is your captain speaking. I need all passengers to return to their cabins immediately. I repeat, this is not a drill. We are entering a severe weather event." The words were calm, but his face was a mask of stark terror. Eleanor looked out the window one last time. The ocean, moments ago so peaceful, was now a violent, churning mass of deep grey and white foam. The world of the siren's embrace shattered in an instant. What had been a gentle rocking of the boat became a violent, sickening lurch. The ship, once a symbol of power and stability, was now a helpless toy in the hands of a furious sea. The lights flickered and died, plunging the corridors into a panicked darkness, broken only by the emergency glow strips along the floor. Alarms blared a high-pitched, desperate wail. The once glamorous marble floors were now slick with water and strewn with broken glass and scattered belongings. Eleanor, still in the corridor, was knocked off her feet. She scrambled to her hands and knees, fighting against the impossible tilt of the deck. A young woman, holding a small child tightly to her chest, was sobbing uncontrollably nearby, her husband clinging to a railing, his face pale with fear. Eleanor pushed herself up, finding a surge of strength she didn't know she had. "It's all right. We're going to be okay. Get down low and hold on tight," she shouted over the wind and the groaning of the ship's hull. She guided them to the floor, her body shielding the young family from a rolling cart that crashed past them. This wasn't about being right anymore. It was about surviving. The ship was alive with terror. People screamed, prayed, and fought their way toward imagined safety. But Eleanor's focus was on the small group she'd gathered. The young family, a woman named Sarah and her husband Mark, with their 3-year-old son Ben, and a cynical older man named Arthur, who had been loudly complaining about the food all week. Now, his face was a portrait of pure humility. A young crew member, a girl no older than 20 named Chloe, had been caught in the chaos and had a deep gash on her arm. Eleanor, calm and practical, used a piece of fabric from a discarded shirt to tie a tourniquet around her wound. "You're okay. Stay with us," she told Chloe, her voice a soothing anchor in the storm of noise. The captain's voice came over the speaker system, strained and full of static. "We have sustained critical damage to the lower decks. I'm ordering all passengers to abandon ship. I repeat, all passengers abandon ship." The words were a death knell. The beautiful, invincible siren's embrace was sinking. People began to scramble for the lifeboats, a panicked herd. The lifeboat station, normally a pristine, organized area, was now a terrifying maelstrom of wind, rain, and human desperation. A massive wave slammed into the side of the ship, a sound like a bomb going off, and the entire vessel listed sharply. It felt as if the ocean itself was trying to pull them under. Eleanor, her small group in tow, fought their way to one of the last remaining lifeboats. Arthur, the grumpy old man, now a surprisingly steadfast protector, helped Mark pull Sarah and Ben up the steep, swaying steps. Chloe, despite her pain, managed to help too. Eleanor was last, her body aching with effort as she climbed into the small, enclosed craft. The boat was launched into the roiling, violent water with a gut-wrenching shudder. The cable screamed as it lowered the boat, then snapped with a violent crack. They were now adrift, alone in the watery chaos. Through a small porthole, Eleanor watched the siren's embrace meet its end. It was a sight of unimaginable horror and tragic beauty. The cruise ship, once so full of life and laughter, stood almost vertically against the churning sea, its lights still flickering faintly. Then with a final, mournful groan of metal on metal, the stern began to slide beneath the waves. It was a slow, inexorable descent, a grand and terrible swallowing by the ocean. The ship was gone. Eleanor closed her eyes, the salt spray on her face feeling like tears. They had survived the ship, but now they faced the endless, unforgiving sea. When the sun finally rose, it was a hesitant, weak light, casting a hazy glow over an apocalyptic scene. The ocean was no longer a thrashing monster, but a tired, heaving expanse of grey swells. The sky was still thick with clouds, but the rain had stopped. In the small enclosed lifeboat, the 6 survivors were an exhausted, huddling mass. The air was thick with the smell of wet clothes, fear and salt. Ben, the little boy, was asleep in his mother's arms, blissfully unaware of the horror they had just endured. Eleanor, soaked to the bone and shivering, was the first to speak. "All right, everyone," she said, her voice raspy but steady. "We're alive, that's what matters." She opened the small emergency pack, her movements methodical and calm. She found a few bottles of water, some energy bars, and a small first aid kit. She gave a little water to everyone, forcing Chloe to drink slowly. Arthur, the once cynical passenger, was now staring at Eleanor with a look of profound respect. "You knew," he whispered. "You knew all along." Eleanor simply shook her head. "I just listened to what the sea was saying. We all have to listen now. We're in this together." Her leadership wasn't a choice, it was a necessity. She became their rock, their quiet, unwavering light in the darkness. She carefully rationed the water, explaining that they might be out here for days. She took the small, battered compass from the kit and, using her knowledge of the sun's path, tried to keep them heading east, toward the general direction of the coast. She told stories to distract Sarah and Mark and to keep their spirits from breaking. She talked about her garden, the feel of the soil in her hands, the joy of a perfect tomato. She spoke of her children, of the simple, satisfying life she'd led. Arthur, who'd been so dismissive on the ship, now hung on her every word. He began to help her, a new sense of purpose in his eyes. He used his belt to rig a makeshift sail out of a piece of tarp, a small, hopeful gesture against the vastness of their despair. Days bled into a single agonizing blur. The sun beat down, turning their skin red and raw. The nights were long and cold. They ran out of food and water, their hopes dwindling with each passing hour. Sarah and Mark held their son close, their faces drawn with exhaustion and fear. Chloe, the young crew member, was weak from her wound, but tried her best to stay strong. Eleanor, her lips chapped and her throat dry, kept watch. She would not let them lose hope. She kept them talking, kept them focused on the future, on the moment they would see land again. And then, on the morning of the 4th day, the world changed. "There," Arthur croaked, pointing a trembling finger at the horizon. "Is that a bird?" They all looked, their hearts pounding with a renewed, desperate hope. It wasn't a bird, it was a faint, hazy shape, a ship, a real ship. A Coast Guard vessel, a speck on the horizon that grew larger and more defined with every minute. They screamed, they cried, they waved their arms wildly, a final, ragged outpouring of emotion. The Coast Guard ship, the Guardian, spotted them, and a siren cut through the air, a sound of glorious relief. Back on land, in a hospital ward, Eleanor was visited by Captain Harrison. His uniform was gone, replaced by simple clothes, and his face was etched with grief and exhaustion. He didn't look like a captain anymore. He looked like a man who had lost everything. He sat on the edge of her bed, his head bowed. "Eleanor," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I should have listened. I was arrogant. I put my trust in machines and numbers, and I dismissed the one thing that truly mattered. You. You saved those people. You are a hero." Eleanor looked at him, her quiet strength shining through her weary eyes. "We all did what we had to do, Captain," she said simply. "The ocean has a voice. Sometimes we just have to be willing to listen." She was not a hero in a grand, dramatic way. She was simply a woman who had seen the truth in the sky and the sea. The story of her quiet courage was not just a tale of survival, but a testament to the fact that sometimes the greatest wisdom and strength can be found in the most ordinary of people, if only someone is willing to believe in them.